Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give everyone a second here to log in and then we'll get going. All right, we've got a good crowd with us today. So, as people keep filing in, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Monica. I'm so glad that you guys are with us today for our NYOUG and Viscosity co hosted webinar. We've got a powerhouse presenter for you today, Gary Gordhamer, who is also my colleague. So, I'm very thankful for his time today. This is a live webinar. So feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A field. Gary will get to your questions as he can. Anything he can't get to, he will try to get to following the session, and then we can always try to get to you afterwards. So definitely put your questions in. All right. So again, my name is Monica. I work for Viscosity North America, and co-hosting with me today is Rob from the New York Oracle User Group. Rob is going to tell you a little more about NYOUG. I'll give you a quick little viscosity pitch, and then we'll get going.
Okay, thank you, Monica. I'm Rob Edwards. I'm treasurer with New York Oracle Users Group. NYOUG was formed in 1984 for the exchange of ideas, assistance, and support among users of Oracle software products. We can be found on X, Meetup, uh, LinkedIn, Facebook, and on our website, nyoug.org. We'll take a moment to thank Viscosity and Monica in assisting us in these webinars since summer of 2020, for the last five and a
Yes.
half years. Monica?
Thank you so much. Yes, it's been a great partnership, and I'm so thankful for all of you who come back week after week to join us on these webinars. So again, my name is Monica. I'm the marketing director here at Viscosity. It is our mission to enable businesses to transform at a time when companies must change to survive, and we have definitely been in that mode for the last several years as everything, progresses so quickly these days. We are an Oracle Stat consulting firm, and our core expertise is in Oracle database, and that includes RAC, Oracle Apex. We perform near zero downtime migrations. We do tons of performance tuning and high availability projects. And we've also got decades of experience with infrastructure, including engineered systems. We were actually named Oracle Partner of the Year for the Oracle Database Appliance. And we offer project based services as well as managed services and training. So we've been preparing all of our customers to upgrade to 23 AI, 26 AI, and we've been hosting tons of workshops through orapub.com to get people AI ready as well. People like Gary and a lot more of our engineers at Viscosity also help with live virtual training and things like that for things like SQL tuning. I think we had a great one on, oh, what's this recent one? I don't know. You can check it out at orapub.com, but we do have tons of great training there, and they are always live classes. So on this slide, you'll see our three main pillars that we are built upon: data, apps, and cloud, or also infrastructure. And across the bottom, you'll see items that we offer for all three of those pillars. So if anything here speaks to a pain point you've got or something that you'd like to develop your skill set on more of, definitely reach out. I'd love to see how we can help you. On this slide, I've just got some of our common speakers. All of these folks speak around the world, mostly at Oracle conferences, but even beyond that. They are part of the Oracle ACE program, and if you're not familiar with it, I would definitely give it a quick search and read a little bit about it. If you are someone who's interested in training and speaking and being out in the community, talking about and sharing your knowledge, definitely look into it. This is something that Gary has been a part of for a long while. You probably recognize some of our other faces here, but Great program. We love and support it. It's three different tiers of titles that the program gives to non-Oracle folks. So check that out. And then on this page, this is just another version of some of the services we provide. I always like to point out Oracle license management because it's something you probably don't think about as often as like health checks and migrating and updating everything. So Oracle license management, always turn to your trusted Oracle partner just because it's such a hassle and a headache, and your partners are normally doing this so often that it's just much easier for us. We can also get deeper discounts for you typically, and then we can also check in with you and make sure you're actually taking care of your investment and using those licenses properly. All right. Okay, and then finally, today is a live webinar. It is recorded, and you can find that recording later this week at orapub.com. There is a free membership. That's all you need to be able to rewatch all of our free webinars like today. There are paid memberships as well. I always recommend if you're interested in more training to definitely ask your employer if they can reimburse this for you. It is a great resource. And the live training, you do have to pay extra for that, but all of our paid membership tiers get discounts on those. All right, so with that, definitely go to events.viscosityna.com or nyoug.org to sign up for our upcoming webinars. We are building out our 2026 schedule right now, so stay tuned for that. There might still be a couple things on the schedule already, but just know it's about to get a lot bigger. And you can follow us on any of our social media. And with that, I'm going to let Rob introduce Gary to us. And Gary, I'll let you get your slides up.
Hey, thank you, Monica. Gary is a managing principal consultant at Viscosity North America. He has spent much of his career focusing on the enterprise application landscape and business process digitalization. As indicated before, he's an Oracle ACE director. Gary's technical experiences range from Oracle e-Business Suite, middleware, database, and related technologies for the past 29 years. His professional background covers many industries, including healthcare, manufacturing, utilities, and government. Gary, over to you.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks, Monica, for getting everything set up and all the introductions. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. Again, my name is Gary Gordhamer. We'll be covering PDBs today, so hopefully this is an exciting topic, and thanks all for joining us. The slides and the recording will all be available after this is done. The biggest thing I just want to mention is I am available easily to reach, so feel free to email me, hit me up on LinkedIn or Blue Sky. I also wrote the book on Oracle Database 19c Upgrade Performance Tuning, and I am working on a 26 AI version of that book now. So with that, we'll kind of skip ahead here a little bit since Micah covered all that. For those that don't know, Oracle Database 23 AI / 26 AI now, you must use the multi-tenant architecture, right? So that's kind of why it's important. Maybe this is something you've put off for a long time. You said, yeah, I heard that. Or maybe this is new news to you, though. If you've been to an Oracle presentation in the last about 9 years, they've been saying this over and over again. So hopefully this is not new news to you. But this is, something that you have to kind of take on and move to. So, and with that, I'm also going to stop my video here because I kind of think it's a little bit of a waste in the process here to just kind of have that sitting up in the corner the whole time and not be doing anything. So, what is the presentation about today? Why wait? I'm going to tell you, I think it's a good idea for you to convert now to a PDB. Why is that? The biggest reason is that the plugin operation is irreversible, right? So if you're thinking about this in a production environment and I want to move my database to PDB, but I'm going to wait till that new version is available, well, then you're going to be doing a lot of things at once, right? You're going to be taking on a new software version, a new version of the optimizer, and plugging in to a PDB. And if you have problems, just realize that that plugin operation is not reversible directly, right? So you can use some tooling, and we'll kind of talk about some of that on options. But realistically, why take on all of that risk, all of that change at once? Why not move to PDB now, and then get over some of the obstacles that we're going to talk about through this presentation on adopting the new PDB architecture. Again, if you have any questions throughout, here, let me get these windows up. Feel free to drop them into the Q&A box, and I will try to answer those throughout. Okay, just so I have those boxes up. Okay. So again, the goals of this is to try to make you feel comfortable working with CDBs and PDBs. We're going to do some basics on connectivity, security, managing settings, resource limits, AWR configuration, how to move into a PDB, and some backup recovery stuff, right? So we're going to try to make sure that you have the basics all down. Really, if you haven't worked with PDBs or you've been putting it off, hopefully this gets you enough to feel a little more comfortable to kind of start doing some things with it. Okay, so the first big question always is, well, I need multi-tenant to do this, the multi-tenant license. Oracle has actually come out and said you can do 3 PDBs for free. So one of the first things I recommend is if you don't have multi-tenant is go ahead and set this parameter on all of your container databases, max PDBs equals to 3. This will prevent you from doing anything that would cause that multi-tenant license to become initiated, right? So on any of your enterprise editions, if you don't have multi-tenant, just make sure you've set this setting, max PDBs to 3, and that will prevent you from doing anything that would cause the multi-tenant license to initiate. This includes in 12, 18, 19, 21, and now 26 slash 23 AI. Okay. Second, so now that you're in this PDB world, you've got a container database. What should I be looking at? What should I know? Well, the first thing to know is that there's these new views, $V PDBs and CDB underscore PDBs. This is the list of pluggable databases that are in your database. Note that each pluggable database has a container ID, con underscore ID. This ID is not it's unique within a container, but it's not unique across containers, right? So that's just says like in this container database, this is the ID number, short ID number for that pluggable database. Each pluggable database also gets a DB ID. This is more unique. Not guaranteed. I would say not guaranteed to be unique across all of your databases, but generally it's unique enough, right? You probably generally won't see this. If you clone a database, obviously the DB ID comes with it, things like that. And then there's the GUID, which is an absolutely unique ID. And that's often used in things like ASM, OMF paths, et cetera. You might see that GUID in there. So you can look at these things in the $V PDBs view. Also note that the CDB under PDBs view is very useful. If you go to database in your PDB, you're going to see the container database, right? So that's kind of why I start here. If you just get into your database, you want to start asking like, what is my PDB name? Where is it at? Make sure you're looking at the PDBs or CDB PDBs view. If you go to database, by default, you're going to see the container database, right? So in this case, my container database is CDB3, but my PDB is PDB3 or PDBY in this case, right? So, just kind of keep track of that. Um, so in the container world, in the pluggable database world, each pluggable database has its own set of the data dictionary, right? So basically, the kind of this diagram is showing here, we have 3 pluggables. Each pluggable has its own set of the $V views, the DBA views, the user views. And then at the container level, we're going to kind of conglomerate all that together. If you want to think of it as a view on top of views, right? So if I'm in the container and I look at some of these views like CDB underscore tables, I'm going to see tables from all the pluggable databases, right? And for most of the $V views, I'm going to see the same thing. There's that con ID or container ID is going to be added to all of these views so that I can see that. Again, if I'm in individual container database, I will generally see just what's in that container database. But just realize that it's not across the board, right? So generally, you should start looking at CDB underscore views. Those are always filtered, right? If I'm in a container database, the CDB underscore view will only show me what's in that CDB. And if I'm in the global container, the CDB root, then I will see all the objects from all the different pluggable databases in one place, okay? And we'll talk about that most comment in just a second. But so this is the next thing to kind of get used to is keeping track of what container I'm in, and then looking at these views like CDB views. You can still use the DBA and the all underscore views. Just realize, they're generally consistent, that they only show you what's in that pluggable, but there's a few exceptions, right? And that's the things you're probably going to have to kind of maybe stub your toe on a little bit. The second piece of that is there's this setting, container data equals. By default, this setting is set to all. So this is a database in INIT type setting. So some $V views will see data across all containers, even if you're in a container. If you want that behavior to be more isolated, right? That I'm in a container and I only want to see the data in this container for all views, no matter what, then you should set this container underscore data equal to current dictionary. There is a Moz note about it. I'm sorry, I don't have the new KBID. I know Moz just changed a week ago, so I should update this to find the new KBID that they've changed that to. But I believe if you search for that 29.152.11.1, they do have the fixes in there. I think now that we'll find the new KBID for that matches this. But the short answer is I've seen customers that have done heavy consolidation. Maybe they have, 10 or 20 pluggables in a single container. These consolidated views can start having performance issues because of the large number of objects that they're touching. So, generally, I recommend that you set this, especially if you're doing consolidation, you're doing like, say, more than 5 PDBs. If you're seeing performance issues with some of your data dictionary queries, like table space usage, stuff like that, again, visit this setting and see if that's something you want to set to reduce that and kind of isolate the data dictionary views so that you're only seeing what's in your current pluggable database. Okay. PDBs, what can they be as far as open mode, right? So just the DBA, like my normal database, I start it up, I shut it down. What about PDBs? So each PDB can be in its own state, mounted, read-only, or read-write. Read-only and read-write can also be in a restricted or upgrade mode. And we'll talk a little bit more of those in the next slide. You can change, so if you're in the root container and you have the right authorization, you can alter a pluggable database and open it read-only, read-write, and you can open it on certain instances. So notice that like on a rack system, I can say only open on node 1 or node 2 by giving the instance name. At CDB startup by default, if you haven't changed this, a PDB will only be in the mount mode, right? So if you shut your database down, bring it back up by default, a PDB will be in mount mode unless you've opened it read-write and saved its state, right? So you can alter a pluggable database and save its state, and that means whatever state it's in at that moment when you save it, that's the state it'll go back to when you open your container database, right? You can also close a container data or a pluggable database, sorry, either immediate or abort, right? So immediate meaning I want to wait till sessions finish what they're doing and then I'll close that pluggable, or abort, just close it completely immediately, right? So very similar to how we treated a non-container database. Just notice that these commands now are like at the pluggable level, right? Because I'm acting in individual pluggable databases instead of the whole container database. So what about those like restricted or upgrade modes? Well, the easiest way to get to those is to use your old startup shutdown type commands, but do them within the context of a container database, right? So if you're connected, say, as sysdba, and you've set your current container database to a pluggable like PDB1, if I say shutdown immediate, notice that the response I get here is that it's going to say that pluggable database is closed. So shutdown immediate still works here. It's just acting at the pluggable level because my session is in a pluggable database. Same here, if I want to start up upgrade, it's going to act at that pluggable level. And notice that in this $PDBs view, I have this open mode and I have the restricted flag, right? So you can see here, after I do the startup upgrade, this PDB is in migrate mode and it's in restricted session mode, right? So certain, UTL scripts, et cetera, have to be run that way. So just note that, yes, you still have to run those in pluggable databases because each pluggable database has its own data dictionary, right? So things may have to be done at an individual pluggable database level. Um, I'll talk about this more later, but if you're using a tool like Auto Upgrade or Data Patch, those tools are generally very pluggable smart and will do things for you. But sometimes, like if you're in 26AI moving to the large column length, the 32K varchar column, there's a UTL script you need to run for that. That needs to be run at the pluggable database level, okay? Just as an example, when it's in upgrade mode. Here you can see just finishing that. So after I'm in upgrade mode, I can shut down immediate that pluggable and then start it up to get it back out of that upgrade mode, right? Just kind of finishing the process there. Again, if you guys have any questions, please throw them in the chat. We'll be happy to answer those as we kind of go throughout. But I'm going to kind of keep moving. I got a lot of little topics to kind of cover here. So now connecting, right? So I talked about like being in the context of that pluggable database. How do I connect to the pluggable? If I'm someone who just pretty much always goes in and does SQL plus connect slash sysdba, how do I kind of change my behavior, right? So you can still do this connect slash as sysdba. But to switch to a pluggable database, you're going to want to run alter session, set your container to this pluggable database. There is kind of a trick, if you want to say, of this also. In like Unix or Windows, you can export a variable, very much like you would for Oracle SID. You can export Oracle underscore PDB SID. And then when you connect S like slash SysDB, any kind of OS level connection, it will set your container to this variable immediately. Okay. Just note, and I'll talk about this again a little later, we're talking about fixing your scripts. Just note that this OS variable does not show if the PDB does not exist, right? So if I say set my Oracle PDB SID equal to not a PDB, right? And then I connect to the database as sysdba, if the PDB doesn't exist, it's just going to put me in the root container, okay? So just realize there's no error message or anything if that PDB does not exist. So it's not what I would call a fully fledged workaround. It's kind of like a little bit of a hack. But just realize that it doesn't check if it exists. It's just if it does exist, it'll set you to that container right away, right? The second way to connect to a container is using service names. Each pluggable, which we'll show on the next screen, was going to have a default service name based on their pluggable database name. For a long time, Oracle has recommended do not use the default service name. Okay, and we'll talk about that in just a couple slides. There's lots of reasons for that, but the short answer is by using the default service, it makes it harder to do some maintenance operations, etc. So it's recommended that you create services for regular application usage, right? And then you can, you can look at services by using the listener control services command, and then obviously connect to a service by using user at service name, right? So the second way to connect to a pluggable is really by using that service name. And that then, unlike the previous one, if that service is down or unavailable or something, you will get an error message, right? So where that Oracle PDB SID is kind of a workaround, just realize it won't give you an error if that PDB is not open or unavailable or something like that. If you're using a service, that's different. The service will tell you like the database that pluggable is closed, the pluggable is unavailable, the service is unavailable. All those kind of errors will continue to happen. High availability service. Okay, we'll talk about service just a second. I think that question, we'll get to that in just a second. So just to show, like, here's a listener control services command, and you can see I have a service for PDB3 here, and it's in my CDB instance, right? So that instance will handle service requests for that. I have a service for PDBY, and then I have a service for CDB3, which is my container database. Again, just realize these are the default service names, which we're not recommending that you use for normal work. For maintenance activities are good, but not for normal like application connectivity. But a lot of times people aren't familiar with this listener control services command, so I'd just like to show an output for that and notice that what services is specifically showing you is services and then what instances they're available on, right? So services has been recommended for many years that you don't use the default, right? That which is what matches the DB name. It's really that you create custom services for your application connections and maybe create additional services for maintenance activities like backups, etc. Why should you do this? It allows for seamless migration. Services can be cross-registered with listeners across servers. You can stop a service for DB maintenance, e.g., I can stop the application service, but still get into the database to do patching, upgrades, maintenance, etc. You can't stop the default service, right? So my PDB3 service, I can't stop PDB3 and still connect to the system, right? Because the default service will always be there. Services don't care about the database name, so they're very critical for HA and DR operations, right? So if you have different data guard database names, etc., which is generally what you want to do to keep to keep some sanity, so you know that this database is different than this one, different physical server or something. But you can have the same service names there, and again, they can even have them cross-registered, right? You can have this service available on your data guard standby, but pointing back to your primary, things like that. So that's why it's important to have services defined for things. Is there any limitations creating CBD on a single host? No, there's no limitations. TDB container architecture, multi architecture is available on single host. You can also create services on a single host. So here's an example of creating a service on a single host. If you're not using CRS or ASM, you just have a single host with file system based database files. You can create a service and then start and stop that service by using these examples. Those services will show up in your listener control services, etc. So services are recommended no matter whether you're using rack or not rack, etc. So Number of CDBs on a individual system. You can have just like individual non-container databases, as many non-container databases as you could host on a server. That's how many container databases you can host. At that level, it's more up to OS resources, memory, CPU, etc. The pluggable limitation is really the licensing limitations, right? The three PDBs. If you don't have multi-tenant, if you do have multi-tenant, then I'm going to get the number wrong, but I think it's like what 4,000 and something on Exadata and 253 or 4 or something like that on non-Exadata. So still a very large number of PDBs per CDB. Okay, so now, Gary, you've talked about how I connect the pluggables. I have all these scripts that do my maintenance, backups, etc. How do I fix those to work in a pluggable world? So my first recommendation is that we do create service-based connections by creating wallets with service connections. So here's an example of a quick URL connecting to my PDB1 maintenance uh, service. And I'm using and we'll talk about these in a moment, global user, C $script DBA, and a password. And I'm going to store that in a wallet. And you can see now I have a saved credential in that wallet, and I can just connect with that name and I get right in, right? Um, again, for Unix-based systems, you can use this Oracle PDB SID environment variable. Just again, caution if that PDB is named wrong or if it's not available, the script will still connect. So make sure you put something in your script like this, select syscontext con name, right? What's my container name? And make sure that that return matches what you've expected the PDB SID to be, right? If this for some reason comes back as the container name, the container CDB3, or as the wrong PDB, then your script probably shouldn't do what it thinks it's going to do, right? So if you're going to use the Oracle PDB SID method in your OS scripts, nothing specifically wrong with that. Just make sure you're verifying that your connection worked correctly and that you're in the PDB you think you are and that it's open. If you're using like a wallet with a service name, then as I said, if the service is down or unavailable or something, you'll get an error message. That will work fine. Um, the other tip I usually tell people is that I frequently use the wallet-based credentials and I set up multiple SQL.NET directories with different wallets in them, different settings for different wallets that have different connection information if they would be overlapped. And then I can just point my scripts using TNS admin to a specific directory, and that has the settings for that wallet, for that connection information, et cetera, right? So if I have a wallet for backup information and a wallet for monitoring scripts. I just set up different directories for those, different TNS admins. And then in my script that does backups, I set my TNS admin to the one that has the wallet and stuff for that connection, right? So there's many ways to kind of handle this, just kind of giving some examples of how you might adjust your scripts to work. One advanced thing about this, so certain commands don't work in PDBs. For example, alter database backup control file to trace. This might be an extreme example, but just realize some of these commands will not work at a PDB level. If you have scripts that need to do certain things like this, you can go ahead and set this non-CDB compatible equal to true, and this will allow some of these scripts to work in pluggables, but it does reduce your security level, right? Because some of these things that you would not want a pluggable database admin to do, they would now be able to do. That may not be an issue in your environment, but just realize I think of this more in a scripting world, right? Because you may have automated certain things. You want the automation to continue. In the pluggable world, we're trying to isolate each pluggable to some extent. To just realize this is an option if you need certain DBA level type commands to work that maybe will stop working in a PDB world. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's this new user type called a common user. A common user is a user that exists across all the pluggables in your system, right? We create this in the container, it exists everywhere. By default, they all start with C pound pound, but also realize all of the Oracle built-in accounts are common accounts. So like sys, system, DBS, and MP, these exist at the container level. You set the password at the container level. That password is the same across all the pluggables. That user exists across all the pluggables, right? Um, if you plug a new PDB in and that user does not exist, it'll get created in the pluggable when you plug it in. Just like common users, there's common roles. Again, a lot of the built-in ones like connect, select catalog, et cetera, DBA are common roles also. They're the same prefix as the DBAs, that C pound pound. They can only be granted to common users when you create these, but you can grant local grants to that role, right? So maybe you have a schema that's only in this one pluggable, and you want to grant select on tables in that schema to this one pluggable. You can do that to a common role, and it'll still pass through, but the role itself can only be granted to common users. So, for example, I showed maybe having a common user for backups, maybe having a common user for running your monitoring scripts, etc. Right? Okay. So now I've consolidated the stuff. I maybe am using common users for some administrative work, etc. But there's other things in my database I'm worried about sharing, right? So for example, maybe I use external tables and I have external jobs as part of, or pre-jobs as part of those external tables, like, run this script before you access this table or something you've seen, maybe examples on Ask Tom site where they're like, we're going to pre-process file by unzipping it before you read it from an external table. That unzip is a little shell script. But what if I don't want every PDB to run as the same user? I want those things to run as different users. You can set PDB OS credential at the PDB level, and that's the name of the OS user that some of these external things will run as. So you can still separate out some of those external items that need to run at the OS level on a per PDB basis. For file access, you can adjust the DB create file dest, which will, like you're creating tablespace files, etc., will adjust where it can write to within that database. And then there's also, when you create a PDB, there's a path prefix command or option, which says when you create the PDB, all the files will go there, right? The second way, which we're talking about in the next slide, is lockdown profiles, right? So maybe I want someone to be able to do something to PDB, but I don't want them to grant all the access to that, right? So specific administrative commands, etc. Lockdown profiles, which is new since the pluggable architecture allows you to do this. So for example, I want to be able to give someone in a PDB the ability to turn on PL/SQL debugging, but I don't want to give them alter system, all these other alter system options, like changing the optimizer mode or DDL lock timeout or all these other things. I can create a lockdown profile that says disable the statement alter system except these options. And so this profile can be set at the PDB level. So now if I grant someone alter system privileges, they can run alter system, but they can only run these clauses, right? So this allows me to give access, but not grow that access to the point where they could reach outside of their pluggable and do things that I don't want them to do. You can have multiple lockdown profiles, but only one can be active at a time in a PDB. So this is a very simplified one. If you're interested in this, please look into lockdown profiles. They're very powerful, but they allow you to be very granular and not just say, well, I need DBA rights. Well, now I can say I can give you alter system, but only the pieces of alter system that you need to do your job instead of being just open up alter system to the whole world. Okay. Okay, so now I've got my kind of architecture. I know what PDBs are. I know how I should be connecting to them. I've created services. I want to get in there and lock some things down. But now, how do I create a PDB? There's really 5 methods, right? So there's a seed PDB in every container database. If I just go create pluggable database and in the syntax, it's going to just copy the seed database down to my new pluggable. I can also clone an existing database. Okay, so this is where I say create PDB from another PDB. And so this is within the same container, right? So this is just going to copy those files over to another pluggable and then open it up and rename it, right? You can also use the no data option if you want all the structures, but none of the data to come over. So that excludes the rows of data. So that's kind of a neat feature. You can also clone a PDB over a database link. So if I'm trying to go from one container to another, I can create a database link between the 2 containers and say, clone this pluggable 42 from pluggable 2 over this DB link from another database. Just realize that there is overhead with that, right? I mean, you're basically copying the database files over that database link. So your mileage may vary on whether that's a good idea or a bad idea on how big your database is, et cetera, but still a very cool option to do that. You can always restore a PDB from RMAN, an active clone, or from a backup, right? So maybe you have a production pluggable and you want to clone that to non-prod. It's a very large system. You can restore that PDB as a clone from a backup maybe you took, maybe your backup system has it, or it's on an NFS mount or something, or you can do an active clone. So you can use RMAN to do all these same features, right? Just like you would use RMAN to clone a database, you can clone a PDB in a similar manner. Finally, you can plug in a non-PDB into a container, right? So you have a non-pluggable database, non-container database today, and you want to make it a pluggable. I would recommend using auto upgrade. So auto upgrade is the tool of choice for doing that process. Okay. There's a question on EBS on are you still limited to one CDB to a PDB? I believe that is, or one PDB to a CDB. Yes, I believe that's still the EBS requirement. That's a EBS team kind of certification problem. If data guard is in place, create a PDB primary also creates a standby. How about hot cloning in a primary? Okay, yeah. So data guard, the current version limits that. Yes, the standby and the primary, or the primary and the standby are basically mirrors of each other. There is features for that coming out that will allow you some more flexibility. But yes, that's pretty much a multi-step process. When you start cloning into your primary, you have to, kind of do some things on your standby manually to get that in sync. But there are things coming in that feature set that allow you to disable data guard at a PDB level. Um, I must admit, I don't remember what versions things are specifically coming out at, but I would have to look that up. But there's a whole set of features there, and it gets way more complex when you start talking the data guard world. But the default is the primary and standby are kind of mirrors one for one at the moment. Yes. And at the moment, I'm talking about the 19C iteration of the world, since that's what most people on-prem would be on. So that's kind of the world I'm specifically speaking to. Okay, let's keep going. Initial use of parameters. So how do I manage settings within a PDB? So parameters in PDB are stored in this PDB SP file $, which will be blank until you unplug it, right? So just realize that that's where you might think to look, but they're not there. To view what you're currently set to, you look at the $V system parameter or $V parameter tables, depending on whether you're looking at the instance level or the current session. Change to the PDB parameters that are saved are in the $SP parameter view. Okay. So if you've gone to a PDB and you've made a change to a parameter, it's not in the SP file, it's in the $SP parameter view of that PDB. Only parameters that say is PDB modifiable is equal to true can be modified at the PDB level. But that's a lot of them. A lot of things can be changed now at the PDB level. To change a parameter at the PDB level, you can set your current container to a PDB and use alter system, which will change it in that container. Or at the container level, you can use alter system, and notice they have, now you can say container equals. PDBs can have different settings at each rack instance level, right? So if you do want something to look different on node 2 versus 1, etc., you can do that. Just realize the SID, your same syntax with SID equals, etc., works also at the PDB level, just like it works at the container level. So as an example, so here's something we're setting PGA, SGA. How does that work when I'm using this at the PDB level, et cetera? So I might have in my SP file, which is at the container level, I have 60 gig of SGA and a 10 gig target. But then in my PDB3, I might have a SGA max size of 10 gig, right? So you see PDB3 is only going to use 10 gig of each of these. But on CDBT 01 instance 4, right? So that's this other node. I can set it to a larger size, right? So just realize that I can do these settings on a per instance level and a per PDB level across, right? Just by using my normal syntax, but I set these at the pluggable levels, right? So I can control, even though I'm consolidating, I can still control so that one PDB doesn't take over like all the SGA or the cache, library cache, or all of the buffer cache, etc. So as an example, how does that work at a per PDB level? So SGA target is the max size of the SGA, right? So here my SGA target for PDB2 is the max size it could use. If I set SGA min size, that's the guaranteed minimum that PBD will get. If you don't set these, Oracle will auto manage this, right? So if I've given the container database 60 gig and I have three PDBs, then Oracle will auto manage how much each gets of the SGA as it goes along and usage is used, right? I can go in and set these targets for each PDB if I want them to be guaranteed a certain amount, right? And that goes true for the PGA, et cetera. Okay. If you're on Exadata, you can use IO Resource Manager. So this is a way to have the database manage IO resources, right? So the one database doesn't like take over all of the shares of the storage, right? By default, IRM does not kick in until the system hits 100% utilization. So a lot of people are worried about this because they're like, if I set this, then I'm going to be throttling back a particular database that may need this at times. So IORM only kicks in when the system is busy, right? So in this first graph, I have a system that's not 100%, and so PDB1 can use as much resources as it wants. Notice it's getting up to 90, 100%, et cetera. In the second example, I have the system peaking, getting peaks at 100%. So because it's hitting 100% and there's two pluggables that want work to be done, it's one share and one share. So each gets 50%, right? Because each of those were given one share. So there's two shares trying to get access. Each has one. So, oops. So they get 50% each. So they get an even share. Now PDB3 kicks in, and PDB3 has a bigger share than those guys. So now we have four shares that could be needed. Since we're at 100%, PDB3 gets 50% of the IO, PDB1 and 2 each get 25%, right? So this is just a simple example to get you thinking about how IORM could help you, like in an Exadata environment. If you have something like a reporting database and OLTP, and the OLTP during the day needs to be really important, right? And reporting needs to be a little less important, but then that overnight hours, reporting needs to run all their ETLs and stuff, but OLTP is not doing anything. This is a quick example of how that would look, right? So again, if you have that and you're worried about resources, look at IRM on the Exadata. Okay. One of the things that happens when we consolidate heavily, Oracle has all these great maintenance jobs that run every night, like doing autostats, doing partition checks, doing SQL Tuning Advisor or SQL Plant baseline checks, etc. So now I've put 3 or 4 or 6 PDBs into a single database. Each of those pluggables has their own set of maintenance jobs. What happens at 2 in the morning or 11 o'clock tonight when all those kick off at once? So there is a setting now, auto task max active, number of PDBs. So this limits the number of auto tasks that will start simultaneously. It does default to 2 now, so that you don't have like 3 or 4 or 5 all kicking off their auto tasks at the same moment. You can also go into individual PDBs and disable auto tasks. So maybe you have a read-only PDB that or it's probably not read-only, but one you clone regularly for reporting purposes or something. If it's cloned from another system and data is not updated, you probably don't need all this maintenance jobs run. So you could, in that maybe reporting database, turn off maintenance jobs, or you could just shift the maintenance window. So in an individual PDB, you can go and change the maintenance window so it's at a different time if that helps you out, right? You can also disable certain tasks. So maybe there's just a certain automatic tasks you want to disable. You can use the DNS Auto Task Admin and disable those tasks. But just something to look out for as you start to consolidate is that multiple tasks could overlap with each other, and you might see that spike, right? Especially things like DBMS stats might be a big spike if too many PDBs are trying to run it at once. AWRs. So by default, AWR is kind of a database level view of the system, workload looking at like how does my whole system look. So by default, it's collecting data at the container level. You cannot see individual PDB level metrics, right? So the number of IOs, et cetera, are for the whole container. If you want to see pluggable level metrics, you change into the container you want to collect, and you set this setting, AWR PDB auto flush enable equal to true, and then you can change also your snapshot settings at a PDB level. Okay, that will then collect information at the PDB level separate in that AWR, right? So now you'll have AWR snapshots at that PDB level separate from the CDB level. Okay. If you have lots of PDBs and you're doing this, you want each PDB to also collect snapshots, you may want to set an offset for your snapshots. So they're not all happening at the same millisecond, and therefore maybe kind of, again, a resource contention you might see in your system. So just consider that if you do want PDB level AWR reporting and you're consolidating multiple PDBs, you may want to, not just turn it on, but also turn a offset on when those snapshots run. Once you've got it at a PDB level, how do I run my AWR reports? Same scripts, you run them the same way. You just make sure you set your session to be in a container, right? So once you're in that container, these reports will run the same way. They'll just only show you container level, pluggable level data, right? If you want to run them at the root level, set your container back to the root. So $root is the root container of your system, right? So that would be just going back to looking at the container level AWR report. Okay. Keep moving along. We got a couple more slides to go here in 15 minutes. So character sets. So if you want multiple character sets, like maybe you have databases with unique character sets, not NLS, the default NLS UTF character set, can I combine those into a single container database? And the answer is yes. Build all your container databases using AL32 UTF-8, AL16 UTF-16, and as long as your pluggable database character set is fully encapsulated in that character set, you can plug it in. And just about all of them, sorry, erase that. Just about all of them are encapsulated, right? There's a very small number of accepted character sets that don't fit in that model, but hopefully most of you aren't using that. What if I need to build a PDB with a different character set? Because if I go into my container database that's AL32 UTF-8 and I build a pluggable, it's just going to build it with that character set. What you need to do is build a small dummy container database specific to that character set that you want. Maybe and then create a PDB, maybe name it something like this character set underscore seed. Then you can unplug that pluggable database and plug it into your other one. And that can be a seed database. So if you want to create one with that character set, create, pluggable database from this other one, and you'll get that character set, right? So that's a way to get, if you need a couple different seeds at different character sets, just create those once and then plug those in, and then you use those seed pluggables with the character sets you need. Okay. Undo mode. In your pluggable world, you're going to have either local or shared undo. Recommended is local. What this means is each pluggable database gets its own undo table space and its undo is unique. This is required for features like PDB relocate, PDB cloning in read-write mode, right? So if a pluggable, you want to do like hot cloning or hot relocate, that pluggable has to have local undo because all of its changes have to be active in one place. You can also use shared undo, where one undo table space is used for the whole container, but that disables some of those cloning features because to clone a pluggable, you have to put it in read-only mode, right? So it's recommended that you use local undo. If you plug a PDB into a container database that is set for local undo and that pluggable does not have local undo table space, Oracle will immediately create a local undo for you. To see what settings you use, look at the database properties view. Okay, you can see what's enabled. But again, we recommend local undo for most situations just because it gives you the most flexibility, the most isolation. Okay. Backups. So how does this affect my backups? Very little will change. You're going to do your backups at the container level. You can backup individual pluggables if you want to, like this backup pluggable database. Or you can just connect to the database and back up the entire database, right? Just realize if you're going to back up individual pluggables, make sure you back up the CDB root. And I'll say this again on another slide. The CDB root contains all the information about all the pluggables. So you have to back up the CDB root if you want to do certain things, because the pluggable backup will only contain information about the files from that pluggable database. It won't contain some information that says that pluggable database is made up of all these files, right? So the CDB root is very important if you have to restore your whole system. Okay? You can also do your backups by connecting with like wallet-based credentials, right? So here's an example where I've saved a sysdba common user into a wallet credentials. I can connect with that and I can back up the database. Again, I frequently use multiple TNS admin directories in my scripts so that I can point to different wallets for different connection strings. So what does that PDB recovery stream look like, right? So each CDB has this list of data files. And again, that CDB root is kind of key to some of that, just the information about the list of data files. And then each data file has like a current SCN number, right? And then in our archive logs, we have a stream of all those changes. The archive logs are shared across all the PDBs in that CDB, right? The archive logs are at a container level. So the SCNs that are being captured are across all of the pluggables, but each transaction has a DB ID associated with it, right? And that DB ID information again is stored at the container level, just to be clear. Um, but as you might guess, this starts to be pretty complex. Which redo logs do I need for which pluggables at which time? That stuff's all managed by Oracle. So use RMAN to do this stuff. 99% of the time, RMAN will take care of that association for you, right? It'll know that these logs are required by these files at this time, and those files are part of this PDB because that PDB is part of this container database, which is that CDB root. So just managing those connections is very important, and hence use RMAN to do that. If you want to back up all your databases, but say exclude one pluggable, again, maybe you have that reporting pluggable database that you clone once a week and you don't want to back that up, you can't exclude a PDB, but you can say back up and include the ones you want. Say back up this one, this one, this one. Again, make sure you're backing up that CDB dollar root. That's kind of your baseline for a restore because that's the container that knows all the information about the pluggables. Okay. If you are doing shared undo and want to recover a single PDB, you have to recover the whole CDB first before you can recover that because that shared undo has to come back. That's why, again, local undo is recommended because it gives you more flexibility with managing each PDB. Yeah, for local undo, you can recover individual PDBs just like the normal backup syntax, right? And yeah, again, the PDB must be in mount mode or dropped to do things like restore it, et cetera, right? So there is some pre-work sometimes, depending on your situation. Just like a normal RMAN recovery, it's not going to overwrite a database that's up and running. So the same with a PDB, if that PDB is up and running, it's not going to allow you to restore over the top of it, right? Okay, so let's go through some like migration upgrade kind of scenarios just to kind of talk through them. So PDB upgrade. So once you have a PDB and say this is like 1922 and I want to go 1924, what are my options to get there, right? So I could upgrade the whole CDB in place, right? Shut down this T3DB, which brings down both my pluggables, and then I, do an upgrade process to switch to a new home, using auto upgrade, auto place patching. I move to 1924 and I bring this up and now I've upgraded all those pluggables to 1924. Another way to do this is I could have a T3DB that's running 1922 and a T4DB running 1924, and I could unplug PDB3 from there and plug it in to T4DB. And in the plugin operation, all of the upgrade stuff, like the catalog upgrade stuff, will happen by Oracle automatically. I could also do that across two different servers by using either a duplicate or clone process, using RMAN or the create over a database link, et cetera. I could do that over to another server. But just, one of the benefits of being in PDB mode is it makes it easier for me to do some of this work, right? I can instead of having this like bring everything over at once, I could set up another container database and I could just unplug this one, PDB3, and bring it upgraded, but still leave PDB-Y maybe behind because they don't want to be upgraded to that version yet, right? So just realize PDB makes a lot of this easier, from a outage standpoint, because all of that, like building the other database, the other home, et cetera, is all ahead of time. And if I need to unplug and go back, there are definitely ways to unplug and go back also, right? So just some other ways to think about how you can do this stuff. And again, auto upgrade can do all of this. So please make sure you're looking at auto upgrade if you've not. In the references at the end, there's a great link to an auto upgrade live lab, which will walk you through a lot of these steps. But auto upgrade is the way to do all of your patching now, all of your upgrades. In 26 AI, it is the only tool that they're going to recommend to do everything with. In 19C, obviously, you still have the old methods, but they're recommending you use auto upgrade. In 26 AI, you're going to be moving to this. So definitely make sure you know how to use this. Lots of great blogs, et cetera, on how to do this. Can I unplug and plug into another CDB with no copy? Yes. So this first blue arrow here is an example of unplugging this PDB3 on the same host from one container to another, it is not copying it. It's just plugging it in. Just realize the rollback process is a little. I shouldn't get into it. It just yes, you can do that. I'll just stop there. Okay, and again, auto upgrade is the tool of choice for doing this stuff. So again, I'm just going to repeat this. I said this at the beginning. When you convert from non-CDB to PDB, that is non-reversible. So the files that I plug in to PDB that were previously a non-CDB cannot be turned back to a non-CDB. Okay. So make sure you're using auto upgrade to analyze and verify your database to make sure it's healthy and ready to be plugged in. If you copy the database files, you can go back to the old copy, right? Or maybe you took a full backup and you want to restore that backup. But just realize, that's that point in time when you copied it, right? So this is again why I stress, I think you should move the pluggable before going to like 26 or 23 AI, because in that world, you're going to be taking on new optimizer changes, et cetera. If you're just plugging in, but keeping the same optimizer, same code base, et cetera, the chances of you having problems is lower. You're just lowering that risk. Okay. And again, you must complete the move to PDB before upgrading to 26 AI. Okay? Is it possible to move from a standalone DB to a container PDB with zero downtime? It's not zero, just to be clear. The only way to do it with zero downtime is logical replication using like Golden Gate as an example. But to go from non-PDB to PDB, there's always an outage because there's a point where you have to close the database and open it on the pluggable side. You can reduce that time. There's definitely ways to reduce that time, but there's always an outage unless you're using logical replication. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. We got a couple more slides to go, and I'll try to finish up questions at the end. PDB movement, there's really two ways to move PDB, right? There's either data pump, traditional, or file migration, right? Where we use RMAN or DataGuard to copy database files, right? There's pluses and minuses to each, right? So, with data pump, you get a reorg. Maybe if you don't have a lot of data, it moves pretty quick, etc. With file migration, obviously that's better for larger databases, but you don't get the chance to reorg your objects, things like that. I throw a random number out here, 10,000 objects. That's not a real number. Just I can tell you I've done bigger. But data pump can be a little more time consuming to get all the pieces in place to do it efficiently, right? To do a large system, etc. Whereas RMAN or DataGuard, right, you can do that, take a point in time, backup, recover it, and then roll it forward with archive logs to get to a certain point. So that can be easier because you can do a lot of file copy and stuff without downtime. So, just to kind of talk about the methods of how I get my database to move around. Kind of covered that, so I'm just going to go quickly. Here's the data pump method, right? I can either data pump over a database link between two databases, or I can pump it out to a file on a file system and transfer it. Again, the biggest thing here is the latency or lag, right? So once I start that data pump job, if data is changing, or is this an opportunity where I can stop the system, do the data pump work, and bring it over and then bring it back up, right? So it's really that time issue. There's usually benefits for this. If you've not reorged your system in a long time, things like that, there's usually benefits for data pump, but obviously the amount of time it takes to do this can be restrictive. File migration, this is usually the fastest way to move a bunch of data, right? I have database files, they're in place. I just need to get them to the other system and bring them up. RMAN supports things like platform migrations. Maybe I'm going from HPUX to Linux. I can do incrementals, roll forwards, and tooling can take take care of differences if I'm going from file system to ASM or something like that. You still have to have room to transfer all these files between systems. Large systems can take long times. If you have terabytes of data, which I have customers like that, these things could take days or weeks to get a clean copy over. And obviously disk space is required to do this. So here's a simple example. So the files from my source are going to be transferred, and then maybe I use RMAN to keep them in sync. And then when I'm ready, I shut down the system, and then I bring it up on my new container database, right? So this is kind of the high level. If I dig into that more closely, so basically this is an example where I have on a single server a container database, a non-container database, and I want to switch it to a pluggable. I can use auto upgrade. I bring down that database. I use auto upgrade to bring it into that pluggable, into that container. I could duplicate the files as a second copy. So all these files could be made a copy over here in case I want to roll back. And auto upgrade provides features for that, right? If you want to copy, et cetera. Again, it's more about the amount of time it's going to take to do that and how much outage you can incur. In this sample, maybe what I do is I have my source system on a target system. I set up a data guard of that non-container database. I keep that in sync. And then when I'm ready for my outage, I shut down my source. I have this finished syncing, and then I go through the auto upgrade plugin process. So now it's just the plugin process that is really the downtime, right? So I've done all that file copy ahead of time, and I've used data guard to keep something in sync in the interim. In this one, in the third one, it's very similar, except for in using data guard, I'm just going to use RMAN to duplicate my database to another target. RMAN can rename the files, do all that work to get them in the right place, and then I can do incremental restores to that one, and then again do that final shutdown, do a final RMAN backup, do a final RMAN recovery on the other side, and then use auto upgrade to plug it into my container database. So just there's lots of different ways to do this. I'm just giving three quick examples to kind of show that. When you plug in the PDB, you can do the source name file convert. So if you have to change your file names, right, from like different file directory system types or to ASM, et cetera, you can use that source file name convert, just like we do with RMAN. Um, if you're using the XML plugin method, you can use source file directory as an option. That assumes all the files are in a single directory. So I do have just a couple more slides, and then I'll stop for questions and see what I can wrap up with. Just a couple quick other considerations. If you're using TDE wallets, consider using auto open wallets. It makes it easier for you to move these between container databases. If you're moving pluggables from one place to another, auto open TD wallets make that much easier. You don't have to constantly be opening your wallets. Always put wallets on shared storage for easy access, like in rack. Make sure they're on ASM so that all your nodes can access them, right? Again, local undo required for any online type PDB clone or migration options. If you're doing some things in your PDB seeds that you want to be, always use, create your own custom seed database and then just always create from your seed. The one example I gave was a character set difference. There's other differences. You do not have to use Oracle's provided seed database. It will always be there, but you can create your own seed database and then just use your create pluggable from your seed, right? PDB relocate allows for live transfer of PDB. It uses network-based block copy over database links. This will cause overhead. So again, your mileage will vary based on the size of your database, size of your network, et cetera. Auto upgrade can help you with this. Auto upgrade has features for this as well. So it also includes connection drain logic, by the way, which is pretty neat. So again, if you want to go down that path and say, I'm going to move my PDB from one like 19 to 26 and use PDB relocate to do that, and I want to use real-time syncing and I want connections drain, AutoGrid can help you do all that stuff together in one scenario, right? Okay, general discussion. If you're going to move from non-CDB to PDB, use auto upgrade. If you're going to build a new instance for patching upgrades, definitely build another CDB. That's another great way to do it. Or if you're going to move a PDB for a CDB for upgrade, just realize you're going to need like that 19 to move to 23, right? You're going to have to be at 19 before you can go to 23, et cetera. And notice the version numbers. I have a slide. I'm not going to go through, but it's in the slides when you get them. Notice that version number, 23.26.2. That should be the Q2 version of 2026 next year. So, generally discussion, use auto upgrade to do these things, use the new features of PDB. Hopefully this has been a good discussion. I will stick around and answer questions, so feel free to throw those in, but definitely thank you for everyone that joined so far. And let me see if I can get through a few more questions. Will the slides be available? Yes, the slides will all be available. I'm running an AX Unix platform, not ASM Exadata Linux. Okay, I'm not sure that that's a question, but I can tell you that on AX, you can definitely use pluggable databases with 19C. And if you're going to use, like, at some point, you're going to move to another system, use auto upgrade to help you with that process, use RMAN to help you with that process. But you can definitely use pluggables in AX with file systems, not without ASM. Not a problem. Any other questions? Please feel free to throw them in the chat. Otherwise, I know I kind of rushed through a lot of stuff. It's a lot of topics, but definitely feel free to reach out with questions and email, etc. Can I remote clone a PDB from a source point in time? You can clone from a remote PDB over a database link. I don't believe it gives you the option to give an SCN. If you do that with RMAN, though, you can, right? So if you use an RMAN live clone, you can give a point in time. Any
Last
other
call for
questions?
questions. There you go.
How do you speed up upgrade of multiple PDBs? The biggest thing I can tell you is make sure you have the data pump bundle patch installed. Data pump bundle patch updates the DBMS metadata package. DBMS metadata is heavily used by data patch, etc. So that's usually one of the biggest steps of your upgrade is either data patch or stats. So those are the ones that usually make sure you have that data pump bundle patch installed. Data bump bundle patch can be installed with no downtime as long as you're not using data pump during the installation of that patch. So it's not included in the RU because it's not rack rolling technically, but definitely look for articles from Mike Dietrich on that. And that's one of the biggest ways to upgrade your stuff. Can you speak to Oracle High Availability Services for PDBs? High Availability Services for PDBs is pretty much like regular databases. One of the big features you can do, though, is, as I mentioned, have services cross-registered. So if you are like migrating a PDB to another server, your services can be registered across those listeners, which means that when the PDB does the migration, connections going to the old server will get redirected to the new server automatically. So um, pretty much the same set of features you can do at the non-CDB level, except for at the PDB level. The biggest, again, thing is some of the data guard stuff is kind of container level, but there are PDB level features coming out kind of bit by bit with 26 AI. So just look for that. If you're really into data guard and really interested in what you can do at the PDB level, there are a lot of features coming in 26 AI. So,
A
any
lot
other
of really
questions?
great questions today.
Is PDB snapshot using copy and write? Okay, I did not go through. I actually hid the slide. Sorry. PDB snapshots and clones. So I don't believe so. The copy and write feature. So for those that don't know, PDB snapshot copy and write is the ability to have your a thin cloned PDB of another clone that basically only contains the changes, right? So it takes up less space on disk. To my knowledge, that's only available with Flex ASM and with I believe it's ACFS file systems. So I believe if you're using Flex ASM or ACFS, you can do the copy and write snapshotting of PDBs. That's my understanding. Any other questions? I think I've gotten through most of these. Or I've done my best. If again, feel free to send me an email or follow up if anything you think of or anything you thought. I definitely take feedback. So if you said, hey, you misspoke on this or something, please give the feedback. I like to keep my presentations updated, etc. So, and hopefully you're all ready to use, you're out there going, yes, I should start using the PDBs.
All right. Oh, Satyajit, I think you're wanting to ask a question. Let's see. I can allow you to talk if you'd like.
Hi, Gary. My question regarding upgrade was in that direction when you're using auto upgrade and you're using jar file and properties files, right? And where you are upgrading it and you have multiple PDBs, like 5 PDBs. So what I noticed, even though you are using parallelism, it just handles one PDB at a time within that job. So how can we, is there any, did you try to experiment or notice how we can upgrade simultaneously, or this is how the feature is built in that you upgrade one by one PDBs?
I would recommend checking the latest version. They upgrade. I mean, Outgrade has a release just about every month or two, and I thought there was a parallel feature that they enabled in one of the more recent versions.
Yeah, the parallel with the 23 AI was only meant at the PDB level when it is doing at a serially one PDB at a time, and then within that it can spawn multiple process. But I didn't see much improvement, and it didn't do all of them simultaneously. But we have to test it out in 26 AI.
Okay. I mean, I definitely would recommend giving your feedback
Okay.
to Mike and his team. Definitely open an SR. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're a very responsive team. Of the teams at Oracle, they're one of the most responsive teams that I've worked with.
Yes. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, any other questions before we close out for the day? I love how many great questions we got today. While you guys think of a couple more questions, just a reminder that this webinar is recorded. You will get an email either later today or tomorrow when it is uploaded to www.orapub.com. You'll also be able to find it at nyoug.org. But look for an email from Viscosity so you can see when the webinar is uploaded. All right, if that is it, thank you guys so much for coming out today and showing up for Gary, NYOUG, and Viscosity. We greatly appreciate it. I hope everyone also has a great holiday season and you get some time off of your busy lives and your busy jobs. Gary, thank you so much again for giving us an hour or so of your time, and hopefully we'll be able to have you back out to speak again.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Gary. Very informative DBA topic.
Yeah.
Not heard about very much.
Yes,
We'll
definitely.
we'll keep
And
doing
thank
them.
you,
We'll keep
Rob,
doing them.
for co-hosting with us today. All
Okay.
right,
Thank you,
everyone,
everybody.
take care.